This lecture will focus on how the interest rate differential between Australia and other countries can affect our external stability. Now, external stability can be separated into three different components. The CAD to GDP ratio of around 3 to 4%, stable dollar or currency, as well as a sustainable net foreign debt. And you can remind yourselves of the goal of external stability on our lecture on external stability as an economic goal. But this lecture will focus on how the interest rate differential can affect the components of external stability. Okay. So what does it mean by an interest rate differential? It means that there is, as the name suggests, there is a difference in interest rates between nations. Now, as historically speaking, Australia has a relatively high interest rate. So let's just take the current November 2013 quote of around 2.75%. This is Australia. And we're going to just say country alpha as a generic country has an interest rate of only 1%. So what this means is that foreign investors are most likely to put their money in Australia or invest in Australian shares, bonds and securities because of this higher interest rate, because they're getting a higher rate of return. So at 2.5% they are getting a higher rate of return. And because we're profit maximizing, and because we're looking to maximize our living standards, we're going to invest in Australia as a business. So what this means is people are going to start, or businesses or investors are going to start putting money into Australian banks, firms, investing in our securities. And as we know, this is recorded as a credit in the capital and financial accounts. So we have the capital, so I'm just going to put note here, the capital, the current, and the capital. We're just going to denote the capital. I'm not going to worry about the financial. The capital and financial accounts here, and the current account here. We know that in the capital account there is portfolio investment, there is direct investment, and other investments, as well as capital acquisitions of firms. But we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to worry about the shares that relate to the interest rate differential. So when firms start investing in Australian bond securities and shares, this represents a credit in the capital and financial accounts because money is coming into the economy. So credit is recorded in the financial account either in portfolio investment, direct investment, or other investment, or even reserve assets. So that's another thing that we've forgotten. So reserve assets. So monetary, gold, reserve bank funds, and all that. So the capital account is going to be credited when overseas investors invest in Australian securities and financial assets because of this higher rate of return. But that's recorded in the capital account because it is a non-day-to-day transaction. It is a long-term or a non-current transaction. In the current account, we know that there's a balance of goods and services, which we're just going to write as G plus S. There's primary, and there is secondary incomes. We're not going to worry about the transfers or the goods and services right now. We're just going to focus our attention on the primary incomes account on the current account, inside the current account, I should say. We know that because investors expect this higher rate of return for their investments, they require income or interest rate payments back to them. And so that represents an outflow of economic benefit or economic activity from the country to overseas. And this isn't recorded in the capital account because it is a day-to-day transaction. So this is recorded in the primary account here. And so the current account is in fact debited because we are paying interest, so interest repayments overseas for them storing their money into our banks. Okay, so since now there's an interest repayment, there are interest repayments overseas on bonds, credits, bonds, securities, options, shares, assets in general. This will reflect in a higher current account deficit because of this debit in the primary incomes category of the current account. So now we can see that the achievement of a 3 to 4% CAD to GDP ratio may not be achieved. So there's a movement away from this. Although it may be achieved, we're going to say that there's a movement away from a CAD to GDP ratio of 3 to 4%. What this is going to happen is that when the CAD to GDP rate, when the CAD increases because of this interest rate differential, because we need to pay interest back to foreign investors for their investments in our financial assets, our net foreign debt will increase given that the current account deficit for that specific year has increased. So what this means for the dollar is that because we need to start paying off our debt, we want to keep it around at a sustainable level around $60 billion as it is at the moment, so 60 billion. We're going to sell more of our currency. So what this means is we're going to start selling more of our currency to pay off our debt. So as we know, the supply and demand of our currency, AUD to a foreign currency, so let's just denote this foreign, and we got the quantity of Australian dollars. So when we start paying off our debt, we need to buy foreign currency, and this will increase the supply of the Australian dollar, and eventually this will depreciate it. So the equilibrium rate will decrease from exchange rate 1 to exchange rate 2 over time. So the stable dollar would then be compromised because of our higher net foreign debt. But the primary effects on external stability are on the current account deficit and the net foreign debt that would be accrued given a higher current account deficit due to this interest rate differential. However, if our net foreign debt is sustainable, and we're going to highlight this sustainable part, if it is sustainable and we're using debt not to pay off further debt, and we're using it for investment, this can be a very good thing. And we're going to talk about national savings. Because of our deficiency in national savings, our high interest rate to attract investors to invest their money here, this could be a very good thing for investment spending. This could be a very good thing for our investment spending by businesses, and therefore efficiency in the way we produce goods and services. So it is not all bad that we have a high interest rate differential, although there is a movement away from external stability, given the CAD may blow up. And by the same token, the net foreign debt may also increase. It's not a bad thing if our net foreign debt here is sustainable, because it represents a capital inflow of money into the economy. And that means we can use that money to invest in capital and equipment, plant, research and development, and all that, which would help our supply side conditions. So the interest rate differential is the difference between our interest rate and other nations' interest rates, and that would be reflected by changes to the capital and financial accounts. So when our interest rate differential is greater than another country's, this means that there will be a net credit into the capital and financial account, but a net debit out of the current account due to interest rate repayments on these financial assets. And so when there's a high interest rate differential, I'm just going to tick this. When there's a high interest rate differential, there's a movement away from external stability. And when there is a low interest rate differential, external stability may be achieved. But there must be nuances to this analysis that we must note, in that sometimes a high interest rate differential does not necessarily mean a bad thing.